Hi, everybody. Let me start by saying the obvious. These aren't normal times. As we all manage our way through a pandemic unlike anything we've seen in a century, Michelle and I hope that you and your families are safe and well. If you've lost somebody to this virus, or if someone in your life is sick, or if you're one of the millions suffering economic hardship, please know that you're in our prayers. Please know that you're not alone, because now's the time for all of us to help where we can and to be there for each other, as neighbors, as co-workers, and as fellow citizens. In fact, over the past weeks, we've seen plenty of examples of the kind of courage, kindness, and selflessness that we're going to need to get through one of the most difficult times in our history. Michelle and I have been amazed at the incredible bravery of our medical professionals who are putting their lives on the line to save others, the public servants and health officials battling this disease, the workers taking risks every day to keep our economy running, and everyone who's making their own sacrifice at home with their families, all for the greater good. But if there's one thing we've learned as a country from moments of great crisis,
you never want a serious crisis to go to waste. And what I mean by that, it's an opportunity to do things that you think you could not do before.
it's that the spirit of looking out for one another can't be restricted to our homes or our workplaces or our neighborhoods or our houses of worship. It also has to be reflected in our national government. The kind of leadership that's guided by knowledge and experience, honesty and humility, empathy and grace. That kind of leadership doesn't just belong in our state capitals and mayor's offices. It belongs in the White House. And that's why I'm so proud to endorse Joe Biden for President of the United States. Choosing Joe to be my vice president was one of the best decisions I ever made, and he became a close friend. And I believe Joe has all the qualities we need in a president right now.
I shake hands, I hug people, I grab men and women by the shoulders and say, you can do this. And whether they're women, men, young, old, it's the way I've always been. It's the way I've tried to show I care about them and I'm listening.
He's someone whose own life has taught him how to persevere, how to bounce back when you've been...
But this standard is not a measure of how we can evaluate the condition of our society. It cannot measure the health of our children, the quality of our education, the joy of their play.
Yet the gross national product does not allow for the health of our children, the quality of their education, or the joy of their play.
Let us pledge that our generation of Americans will pay any price, bear any burden, accept any challenge, and meet any hardship to secure the blessings of prosperity and the promise of opportunity for our children.
We shall pay any price, bear any burden, meet any hardship, support any friend, oppose any foe to assure the survival and the success of liberty.
And I started thinking as I was coming over here, why is it that Joe Biden is the first in his family ever to go to a university?
Why am I the first connect in 1,000 generations to be able to get to university?
Why is it that my wife, who's sitting out there in the audience, is the first in her family to ever go to college?
Why is Glenys the first woman in her family in 1,000 generations to be able to get to university?
No, it's not because they weren't as smart. It's not because they didn't work as hard. It's because they didn't have a platform upon which to stand.
Does anybody really think that they didn't get what we had because they didn't have the talent or the strength or the endurance or the commitment? Of course not. It was because there was no platform upon which they could.
What law school did you attend? where did you place in that class? And the other question is...
I think I probably have a much higher IQ than you do, I suspect.
And he exaggerated his academic record in law school.
Went back to law school and in fact ended up in the top half of my class.
And then there were moments like this, repeated later during the campaign.
When I marched in the civil rights movement, I marched with tens of thousands of others to change attitudes.
But he never actually marched in the civil rights movement at all. Ultimately, it was accusations of plagiarism in his speeches.
I did not know that was a Robert Kennedy quote. My mistake.
That forced him to drop out of the race.
I made some mistakes.
He's still leaning into some of the core messages he highlighted during his first presidential run, often emphasizing his profile over policy, promising to put the country on the right path after what he sees as the ills of Republican administrations. Here he is in 1987.
I tell you today that America is a nation at risk.
In 2007.
This president's going to be judged in his administration, judged very harshly by history.
And in 2019.
We're in the battle for the soul of this nation.
But Biden has struggled to project himself as a man in step with the times, and parts of his political history continue to haunt him, like his role in the questioning of Anita Hill in 1991.
It is appropriate to ask Professor Hill anything any member wishes to ask her to plumb the depths of her credibility.
And more recently, it was his relationship with personal space.
When Joe talks with parents who've lost their jobs, we hear the son of a man who once knew the pain of having to tell his children that he'd lost his. When Joe talks about opportunity for our kids, we hear the young father who took the train home each night so he could tuck his children into bed.
And by the way, you know, I sit on the stand and it get hot. I got hairy legs that turn turn blonde in the sun. And the kids used to come up and reach in the pool and rub my leg down so it was straight, and then watch the hair come back up again. They look at it. So I learned about roaches. I learned about kids jumping on my lap. And I've loved kids jumping on my lap.
And we hear the influence of Jill, a lifelong...
A former Senate aide has filed a police report accusing Joe Biden of sexual assault. Tara Reid told multiple media outlets Biden attacked her in a Capitol Hill office building back in 1993. At the time, Biden was a senator and Reid was working as a staff assistant in his office. A spokesperson for Biden denied the allegations, saying, quote, "This absolutely did not happen." Last year, Reid was one of several women who accused Biden of unwanted touching, including kissing and hugging, but none of them accused him of sexual assault at the time. Reid said she didn't bring it up then because she was afraid of potential backlash. Biden is the Democratic Party's presumptive presidential nominee now that Senator Bernie Sanders has left the race. Reid said she supported Sanders or Senator Elizabeth Warren for the nomination, but that her decision to disclose the allegations against Biden weren't politically motivated.
When Joe talks to families who've lost a hero, we hear another parent of an American veteran, a kindred spirit, somebody whose faith has endured the hardest loss there is. That's Joe. Through all his trials, he's never once forgotten the values or the moral fiber that his parents passed on to him and that made him who he is.
Look, tomorrow's Superstar Tuesday, and I want to thank you all. I tell you what, I'm rushing ahead, aren't I? 150 million people have been killed since 2007 when Bernie voted to exempt the gun manufacturers from liability. It would put 720 million women back in the workforce. Nobody should be in jail for a nonviolent crime. My name's Joe Biden. I'm a Democratic candidate for the United States Senate. What's not to like about Vermont in terms of the beauty of it? And what a neat town. Play the radio. Make sure the television, make sure you have the record player on at night. Poor kids are just as bright and just as talented as white kids. We choose science over fiction. We choose truth over facts. Think about it. We hold these truths to be self-evident. All men and women created by you know the thing.
That's what steels his faith in God, in America, and in all of us. That steel made him an incredible partner when I needed one the most. Joe was there as we rebuilt from the Great Recession and rescued the American auto industry.
On January 1st, 2009, we will request another $25 billion. Then on June 15th, we will ask for $50 billion. On September 30th, another $50 billion. Then, provided there's a rebound in new car sales, on December 15th, $100 billion.
The USA in your Chevrolet. America's asking you to call. Drive your Chevrolet.
In 2008, sales of Ford cars and trucks fell 21%. At General Motors, the figure was 23%. And Chrysler saw a whopping 30% decline in sales last year. Supporters of the big three automakers argue that the government needs to provide Detroit with at least $50 billion in taxpayer money in order to save the American car industry. That's in addition to the $25 billion in federally subsidized loans they've already received. President Barack Obama agrees we must bail out Chrysler, GM, and Ford. So why will taxpayers end up rewarding Detroit for making unprofitable cars?
Chevrolet designers and engineers used all their know-how to make this 1960 Corvair the compact car that people could count on.
Hard to believe, isn't it, that the Detroit car manufacturers, the city that bequeathed to America the Aztec, Gremlin, Citation, and Granada, which President-elect Obama called the worst car Detroit ever built, could have lost so much money in the last year. While many commenters and union advocates paint Detroit's economic troubles as a consequence of the financial crisis, the troubles of the Big Three long predated the current mess. In 2007, for instance, the Japanese car manufacturer Toyota pulled in massive profits while selling fewer cars than General Motors, who during the same period were losing billions. We asked University of Maryland professor Peter Morisi why Detroit was losing so much money while Toyota was cleaning up.
The basic problem is their labor costs are too high, they have legacy costs from the past, and they're burdened by debt. It's absolutely absurd to think that you can pay $75 an hour in wages and benefits and make cars successfully in North America or any place else. The United States has a competitive advantage in making cars if the labor costs are adequately aligned, because those automakers are expanding. There's nothing particularly superior about the engineering in a Toyota.
But bailout supporters, using much disputed figures provided by the Automotive Institute, an auto industry-associated think tank, claim that if the Big Three are allowed to fail, approximately 3 million jobs will be lost.
But that's not going to happen. The transplants, the Japanese manufacturers, the Koreans, the imports can't supply the entire U.S. automobile market. The domestic automobile factories would be reopened by someone else.
If Detroit is immune from market pressures exerted on its competitors, will other countries choose to ignore our subsidies and continue providing jobs to hundreds of thousands of American workers? If union bosses insist on securing exorbitant wages for its members, wages far higher than any other car manufacturer in the world, but American consumers aren't willing to pay extra costs for an inferior product, should Washington bilk the taxpayer to fund cars it didn't want in the first place?
Let me ask you this. Why should a waitress making $12 in Indiana send her tax dollars to Washington to subsidize someone with a pay package equal to about $75 an hour?
Americans are skeptical. While there's some support for the money already loaned to Chrysler and General Motors, a majority are against providing any further assistance to the Big Three. But that's of no consequence to President Obama or your representatives in Congress, because bailout mania has come to Washington, and both Wall Street and Detroit are standing in line, hands outstretched, waiting for politicians to intervene in the economy and save American jobs, whether you like it or not.
He was the one asking what every policy would do for the middle class, and everyone's striving to get into the middle class. That's why I asked him to implement the Recovery Act, which saved millions of jobs and got people back on their feet. Because Joe gets stuff done. Joe helped me manage H1N1 and prevent the Ebola epidemic from becoming the type of pandemic we're seeing now. He helped me restore America's standing and leadership in the world on the other threats of our time, like nuclear proliferation and climate change. Joe has the character and the experience to guide us through one of our darkest times and heal us through a long recovery.
No, my point is,
that's not true. The other one is here.
I said the first. I said the first African-American elected. First African-American. So my point is.
And I know he'll surround himself with good people. experts, scientists, military officials who actually know how to run the government and care about doing a good job running the government and know how to work with our allies, and who will always put the American people's interests above their own. Now, Joe will be a better candidate for having run the gauntlet of primaries and caucuses alongside one of the most impressive Democratic fields ever. Each of our candidates were talented and decent, with a track record of accomplishment, smart ideas, and serious visions for the future. And that's certainly true of the candidate who made it farther than any other, Bernie Sanders. Bernie's an American original, a man who has devoted his life to giving voice to working people's hopes, dreams, and frustrations. He and I haven't always agreed on everything, but we've always shared a conviction that we have to make America a fairer, more just, more equitable society. We both know that nothing is more powerful than millions of voices calling for change. And the ideas he's championed, the energy and enthusiasm he inspired, especially in young people, will be critical in moving America in a direction of progress and hope. Because for the second time in 12 years, we'll have the incredible task of rebuilding our economy. And to meet the moment, the Democratic Party will have to be bold. You know, I could not be prouder of the incredible progress that we made together during my presidency. But if I were running today, I wouldn't run the same race or have the same platform as I did in 2008. The world is different. There's too much unfinished business for us to just look backwards. We have to look to the future. Bernie understands that, and Joe understands that. It's one of the reasons that Joe already has what is the most progressive platform of any major party nominee in history. Because even before the pandemic turned the world upside down, it was already clear that we needed real structural change. The vast inequalities created by the new economy are easier to see now, but they existed long before this pandemic hit. Health professionals, teachers, delivery drivers, grocery clerks, cleaners, the people who truly make our economy run, they've always been essential. And for years, too many of the people who do the essential work of this country have been underpaid, financially stressed, and given too little support. And that applies to the next generation of Americans. Young people graduating into unprecedented unemployment. They're going to need economic policies that give them faith in the future and give them relief from crushing student loan debt. So we need to do more than just tinker around the edges with tax credits or underfunded programs. We have to go further to give everybody a great education, a lasting career, and a stable retirement. We have to protect the gains we made with the Affordable Care Act. But it's also time to go further. We should make plans affordable for everyone, provide everyone with a public option, expand Medicare, and finish the job so that healthcare isn't just a right, but a reality for everybody. We have to return the U.S. to the Paris Agreement and lead the world in reducing the pollution that causes climate change. But science tells us we have to go much further, that it's time for us to accelerate progress on bold new green initiatives that make our economy a clean energy innovator, save us money, and secure our children's future. Of course, Democrats may not always agree on every detail of the best way to bring about each and every one of these changes.
If we spend the next 4 months tearing our party apart, we're going to watch Donald Trump spend the next 4 years tearing our country apart.
Look, because let's talk about what it adds up to. But we don't. Let's talk about math indeed. Okay, so here's the math. No, here's the math.
Excuse me, can I respond to
doing
the
nothing is what will happen.
Senator Sanders, you were allowed a quick response, and then we would like to allow the other
It's moderator, guys.
Sanders?
Can anybody in this room imagine moderate Republicans going over and voting for him? And you have to do that or you can't win.
But we do agree that they're needed. And that only happens if we win this election. Because one thing everybody has learned by now is that the Republicans occupying the White House and running the U.S. Senate are not interested in progress. They're interested in power. They've shown themselves willing to kick millions off their health insurance and eliminate pre-existing condition protections for millions more, even in the middle of this public health crisis, even as they're willing to spend $1 trillion on tax cuts for the wealthy.
After meeting with congressional Democrats who voiced disapproval, the president announced a framework for resolving the ongoing tax cut dispute. The expiring Bush-era tax cuts would be extended for 2 years for everybody. Most Democrats, including the president, wanted the extension only for the middle class. Republicans wanted the tax cuts permanently extended for everybody, including the wealthy. But with Senate Republicans able to block his campaign promise not to extend the cuts for the rich, the president decided it was time to compromise.
I am not willing to let that happen. I know there's some people in my own party and in the other party who would rather prolong this battle, even if we can't reach a compromise. But I'm not willing to let working families across this country become collateral damage for political warfare here in Washington.
The agreement also extends jobless benefits for the long-term unemployed by 13 months. It puts money in people's pockets by slashing the Social Security tax by 2% for a year and brings back the estate tax at a lower level than the president would have liked. In addition, businesses will be able to write off any investments they make next year.
It's not perfect, but this compromise is an essential step on the road to recovery. It will stop middle-class taxes from going up. It'll spur our private sector to create millions of new jobs and add momentum that our economy badly needs.
Some Democrats feared that the president would throw in the towel.
But how can we rationalize tax cuts for the most wealthy Americans when we're facing this kind of a deficit?
Top Senate Republican Mitch McConnell, meanwhile, thanked the president for working with the GOP. The agreement is undergoing careful review, with some aspects of the deal certain to cause problems for lawmakers on both sides of the aisle.
They've given polluters unlimited power to poison our air and our water, and denied the science of climate change. Just as they denied the science of pandemics. Repeatedly, they've disregarded American principles of rule of law and voting rights and transparency.
We're very, you've heard about the controversies within the bill, the process about the bill, one of the items, but I don't know if you have heard that it is a legislation for the future. Not just about health care for America, but about a healthier America, where preventive care is not something that you have to pay a deductible for or out of pocket, that prevention is about diet, not diabetes. It's going to be very, very exciting. But we have to pass the bill so that you can find out what is in it away from the fog of the controversy.
Basic norms that previous administrations observed regardless of party. Principles that are the bedrock of our democracy. So our country's future hangs on this election, and it won't be easy. The other side has a massive war chest. The other side has a propaganda network with little regard for the truth. On the other hand, pandemics have a way of cutting through a lot of noise and spin. To remind us of what is real and what is important. This crisis has reminded us that government matters. It's reminded us that good government matters, that facts and science matter, that the rule of law matters, that having leaders who are informed and honest.
Now to the race for 2020. Frontrunner Democrat Joe Biden under scrutiny tonight for a story he often tells on the campaign trail about pinning a medal on a serviceman in Afghanistan. But there are questions tonight about how much of that story Biden got right. Here's ABC senior national correspondent Terry Moran.
For years, Joe Biden has been recounting a story of American heroism and heartbreak on the front lines, recently telling a crowd in New Hampshire how he traveled to Afghanistan to pin a silver star on a young Navy captain.
One of his buddies got shot, fell down a ravine about 60 feet. This guy climbed down a ravine, carried this guy up on his back under fire, and the general wanted me to pin the silver star on him.
And then a moving moment as Biden approached with the medal.
It's the God's truth. My word is a Biden. He stood at attention. I went to pin him. I said, sir, I don't want the damn thing. Do not pin it on me, sir. Please, sir. Do not do that. He died. He died.
But the Washington Post dug into the story and determined Biden got the time period, the location, the heroic act, the type of medal, the military branch, and the rank of the recipient wrong, as well as his own role in the ceremony.
And seek to bring people together rather than drive them apart.
You know, to just be grossly generalistic, you could put half of Trump supporters into what I call the basket of deplorables. Right? The racist, sexist, homophobic, xenophobic, Islamophobic, you name it. And unfortunately, there are people like that.
Those kind of leaders matter. In other words, elections matter. Right now, we need Americans of goodwill to unite in a great awakening against a politics that too often has been characterized by corruption, carelessness, self-dealing, disinformation, ignorance, and just plain meanness. And to change that, we need Americans of all political stripes to get involved in our politics and our public life like never before. For those of us who believe in building a more just, more generous, more democratic America, where everybody has a fair shot at opportunity, for those of us who believe in a government that cares about the many and not just the few, for those of us who love this country and are willing to do our part to make sure it lives up to its highest ideals. Now's the time to fight for what we believe in. So join us. Join Joe. Go to joebiden.com right now.
If you agree with me, go to Joe 30330 and help me in this fight. Thank you very much.
Make a plan for how you are going to get involved. Keep taking care of yourself and your families and each other. Keep believing in the possibilities of a better world, and I will see you on the campaign trail as soon as I can. Thanks.